Hello everybody and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival. The DIF is an online festival of ideas curated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that asks the question, what if we could redesign everything? My name is Leo, and in this session, Grill the Circular Geeks. It's the first of 9 sessions by Cranfield University at this year's DIF. And in a moment, I'll hand things over to Dr. Leon Williams, who will be asking 3 of his fellow researchers and lecturers at Cranfield University about their experiences and views of circular economy in their research and curricula. And don't forget, this is a grill. We want your questions and comments through the session page and on Twitter through the hashtag ThinkDiff. So don't be shy, ask your questions, and Leon will be asking those to his 3 colleagues. So without any further ado, Leon, over to you at Cranfield.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Leo. As mentioned, this is the Grill the Circular Geeks, and being the 4th year of the Disruptive Innovation Festival, we're very proud to be here to represent Cranfield University. I have with me on the sofa 3 of my fellow colleagues. We have Dr. Rafi Villa.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, who's a reader in bioprocess technology. We also have Marieli Moreno, Specialist Academic Fellow in Data-Driven Innovation. And at the far end of the sofa, Adriana, and pronounce this right, hopefully, Encias Oro Piesa.
Perfect.
Brilliant, who is a lecturer in materials design. We're going to kick off here with about 45 minute session. And again, it's about grilling the geeks about their specialisms, their knowledge, and their general awareness of circular economy. Please do feel free, those of you that are online, to make sure you hashtag under the hashtag ThinkDiff_. And what I will do is I'll try and pick up some of the interesting questions that are pitched from you, and I'll hopefully field them to the guys here. So I'd like to start to kick off with Rafi. So Rafi, prepare yourself with the first question of the day. In terms of circular economy, how did you become interested within this, and how did you start weaving it into your own research?
Yeah, here at Cranfield I teach on waste processes, and well, of course, you know, waste to me has always been fascinating as a starting point to treat the waste. But with the circular economy, I not just treat the waste, I create something new. I can actually express myself into the circular economy, where waste is not more a waste but becomes a resource. And so I've been working on my sort of expertise is in microbial fermentation. So I've been working in producing building blocks, chemical building blocks from sort of material, so natural material, biomass. But you know, more and more I get funding to work with waste feedstock, which is something that I've always dreamed about.
Brilliant opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you for a second, Adriana, if I can pick up with you, if you can give us an introduction again about yourself, how you perhaps introduced, or how circular economy was introduced to you and what it was about.
Well, thank you, Leo. Firstly, well, the first time I heard about the circular economy was actually here at Cranfield at the talk of, it was Ellen MacArthur in 2011 or 2012. And I loved it because it seems like it was like a fascinating framework of thinking to take on board for materials research. So, for example, something we have been working together with PhD students, MSc students, has been about, as Rafi said, to add value to waste and to try to get a material out of it that can be converted for a raw material for different application. So, for example, we have applied for different fundings where we can take on board an industry that is willing to give us their waste, and an industry that is willing to have a go and try what can we do out of it, and can we use it, can we commercialize it, etc. So at the moment we are working about trying to develop a proof of concept, saying with this waste we can achieve this and these applications, different applications for different industries.
Fantastic. And coming over to yourself, last but not least, if you could give us a heads up, Maria, about how circular economy has been introduced into your own research.
Yeah, of course, Leon. So the first time I heard about the circular economy was back in 2010 when Ellen MacArthur Foundation was starting to nail the concept and to put the concept into the world. And at that time, I was doing my PhD on sustainable consumption and design. So my point of view looks more into the consumer and the role of what the consumer has to do with this new thinking and how we could actually, as users, we could reduce our consumption patterns. And my PhD was about that. So I started looking into the concept. I found it really, really interesting. But then here at Cranfield, I had the opportunity to be part of the whole system design module. And last year, actually, we helped IDEO to start developing the circular design tool. So I started looking into what is the transition from my previous studies and during my PhD on design for sustainability, the role of consumption, into how that could be translated into circular design and this new paradigm of design thinking.
Fantastic. So I think there are three different facets, three different areas of interest here in terms of the specialisms that you all bring. I think it's really fascinating that there are these three different dimensions that are represented here. What I'd like to know, what are the types of tools and techniques that you would expect your researchers to try and contribute knowledge to the field? So I'm going to kick that question off with yourself, Rafi. So what kind of techniques and tools would you get your PhDs or request your PhDs and researchers to focus on to ensure that they're using good practices when it comes to circular economy?
Yeah, I think I'm obviously working mainly on the sort of what so-called biological wing of the butterfly of the circular economy butterfly. Is really a little bit of a broader thinking, sort of thinking more holistically about, we can produce something that can from a waste feedstock, but at the end of the day, you have to also look at the consequences. So what are we then creating later on a waste that is more difficult to fit into the circularity? So is really trying to look at the overall picture when you are applying the circularity, so that not just narrow down to your individual process, which might be fantastic, but when you then put it into a more circular design, doesn't fit. So is really not just having a more holistic vision of the overall sort of concept and how that little bit of jigsaw puzzle fits into this circularity.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. In terms of things like life cycle analysis, I assume that you do a lot of those.
Something like life cycle analysis, but yeah.
So you see the biological flows that perhaps come out as a byproduct, perhaps of the industrial processes.
Correct.
So there are interesting kind of push-me-pull-yous here of where perhaps in the product of a manufactured item and also food products that are both entwined. That must cause a lot of challenges within the research, but hopefully trigger off lots of interesting research questions.
Correct. I think for the sort of non-bio cycle, the sort of the other side, you can sort of think about it as in demanufacturing design or something. Thinking about when you're designing, I think Mariales will touch on it, but when you're designing something, sort of think about what happens when you demanufacture that material or that sort of product. For the biological is a little bit more difficult to see that, but you can still implement the same principle with LCA or a little bit more of a.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the biologicals. I hear a lot of examples of technological circular economy practices that have been implemented, but very few about the biological ones.
Yeah.
Could you give us perhaps one exciting piece of research, perhaps from the past, that you've undertaken, or a case study, perhaps, which you've had to try and convert a linear to a circular?
Well, well, we are doing something now with a company called Entocycle. So Entocycle, I'm making you some. It's a very small SME. We are basically using insect to treat waste. Well, we're not at the moment. We're not just treating waste. We're treating byproduct from industrial processes, and the sort of aim of the project is to upcycle the quality of the waste, because going through insect, the quality of the component in terms of amino acid, essential amino acid, for example, in protein, is increased, and that's with the view of putting this higher quality material into the chain, for example, for fish culture, for growing chicken. So instead of giving some sort of waste that has got low content of essential amino acid that is not very useful to some of the animals, we upcycle this material, and to me that's a very sort of simple example of a circular.
Simple but extremely fascinating. I'm going to hold that space for the moment. So we've got a combination of insect-based ecosystems, which are helping a wider ecosystem to work out, in this case, a circular economy. I'm going to move over to yourself, Marielle. Interestingly, could you perhaps describe some of the tools and techniques that you would use within your area of research, and perhaps provide that with a case study, just to really kind of give a bit of a grounding to how that might be used?
Yeah, for sure. Well, looking into my research, the techniques that I use is quite a qualitative research, but I'm really interested as well on how to combine qualitative research with data analytics. So, and how to inform circular economy principles. So, for example, I'm working with Enso, which is a tire manufacturer, and also Enso is a C100 company for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we are looking into how we could collect and analyze data from a city, mobility data, to inform their business model. So they want to have a leasing and remanufacture business model for the tires. And the thing that is quite special about Enso is that their tires are designed specifically for electrical vehicles. So now we are seeing a boom of electrical vehicles in the roads, because of the new legislation of banning all petrol cars by 2050. But it's also that their ethos is not just to put more cars in the road, it's also to see how we could do more circular cities. So they're also interested in see how this mobility data could alleviate some of the big problems in the city, such as congestion, pollution, safety in the roads, well-being. And by using data analytics, but also seeing how we as drivers behave in the road, how we share data through our mobile phones, we could actually predict some of these trends and create strategies to alleviate these problems.
Okay, that's actually really intriguing. I think I'm definitely of the era whereby data informing decision making is of a great fascination and interest, especially academically within the area of design thinking. What I'd like to know is, are there any challenges that you face? For example, if you're dealing with larger communities and you're trying to effectively change the mindsets of many people all at once on many different topics, do you find that there are possibly challenges, especially if you want to try and bring on board industries, small SMEs, to really engage with this type of data-driven innovation project? And also, perhaps, are there any other challenges related to things like ownership of the data and ethical challenges? Do you experience these?
Yeah, there is lots of challenge, especially with big data. Cybersecurity is a really big challenge. I don't think legislation is just yet to a point that we could actually handle this data responsibly. There is also ownership of the data, because who is creating the data is us as users, but who is owning it? The company that deals with the app that we are using, managing the app, or it's actually us that we are creating that data. So this ownership of data is a big issue. Intellectual property as well. We want to make things open source, but at the same time as making things open source could create other problems. So challenges with big data are many, but I think it's a really interesting space to be doing research at the moment, especially because of that, because of the challenges. So as a researcher, I see a challenge as an opportunity to create knowledge and to contribute to. So it's exciting times, I think.
So just talking about the tools and techniques that you use, if, for example, you've got researchers or perhaps some of your fellow colleagues that are here watching the show and they want to get involved and perhaps try and start collecting data on their own, perhaps home systems that they might have, do you recommend any tools or techniques for those?
Well, some, of course, data needs to have some data analytics behind it. So you need to know about data analytics and how to use algorithms correctly. But it's not just about the big data. It's not about sometimes big data can tell us the what, but we are missing the how and the why. So that's those important questions. So I will also look into our patterns of use and look into more as us as human beings of how we actually do things and make a rational of that. And that's why ethnographic research is quite good at. So if we do observations and we really understand why we do things and the way we do it, we actually get more meaningful data. So actually, there is a really nice phrase that I saw the other day by this lady who conducts research, ethnographic research, who said that type of data is actually smart data and is thick data. What we don't need big data. What we need is smart and thick data and make it meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's very prevalent and relevant, especially in the act of being able to capture almost anything and everything, that not necessarily being the right decision in terms of if a company or organization need to hopefully invest large amounts of their own capital and company decision making to make sure that they have sustainability in the future. I'm going to hold that just for a moment, just in terms of data-driven innovation. I want to move over to Adriana. Again, I'm going to ask you the same question if you can for me. What tools and techniques would you get a researcher within the space of materials and design to use if they're wanting to implement circular economy practices?
Well, thank you, Leon. Firstly, it's very much what Rafi said about getting a holistic approach to develop things, to improving things, and to make decisions. So, for example, when we talk about materials, which is my background, materials performance evaluation and ranking, we need to think about what is going on at the very beginning of the planning of improving or developing a new material, and what is happening at the end of life of the component and the material. So, for example, we need to think the first end and the beginning and the end of the project or the material. So actually, Rafi and Mariale have supported some of my research in terms of providing their inputs, either, for example, with Rafi at the end of life of a project or the material, because we really need to understand what is going to happen at the end in order to, is it going to flow, is it going to end up in the landfill, or is it going to get into a strategic flow that is ongoing? In the same way, for example, with Mariale, we have worked on how is going to be the context before we develop the material to make sure that whatever decision we do regarding the material is going to flow and is going to be sustainable. And we can actually say, yes, it's going to have a social impact, environmental impact, economic impact. So what we've done is, for example, to set up different scenarios that will help us to decide, in the case of the waste, which matrix to combine it with. So, for example, at the very beginning, it depends on the application, of course, but we can think, oh, if we want to do, for example, a very hard table, we know that a very good resin is going to do the job, but maybe it won't flow either the techno world or the bio world. So we need to understand first the context, the supply chain, the logistics, etc. And then based on that, we will decide which material is going to make the job of the matrix. And after, we can then think on what is going to happen at the end when that component is not going to be useful anymore. So it's very different, this approach, than just to say, I'm going to do a super duper material that is going to end up in the landfills, or I don't know, it has to do as well. So yeah, I think with these two ladies, I have been working a lot, and I find it fascinating because really the approach and the point of view changes a lot.
We hear a lot when we go to lots of events related to circular economy, this notion of material passport. And the challenges again that we face with trying to identify, track, and perhaps bring a value to a material so that we can hopefully think of long-term investment for that particular unit. I mean, we're talking perhaps even down to the atomic, the atom even itself. What is your stance on this, Adriana, in terms of how do you perhaps take on the perspective of a material passport? Do you see it happening within the next 5-10 years?
I'm not very familiar with the concept of the material passport, actually.
Okay, well, let's throw it out to perhaps some of the other panel members. Material passporting, I know this has a resonance with the data-driven aspects as well, being able to identify and track materials, but also it must be even harder to try and track a biological material. So, so the thought is really, I'm just going to open this question out to both Marielle and Rafi as well. So Marielle, you first.
So, well, yeah, technology could be a really good way of tracking materials back to the system. So at the moment with my colleague Fiona Charlie, we're doing a project that looks into that. So looking into putting sensors into automotive parts to actually track their performance, track the temperature, certain parameters that we could use actually to see how that particular component in the car is working, but then also looking into the material itself and see if we could trace back that material back to the supply chain. But and I know also Fiona has done some work with Granta Design on the same topic. We are looking more into at the moment we're looking more into the component, but that previous work it was more into the material aspects of things. So tracking not how a material will work into a particular component or particular product, and also using data and sensors to track that back. But I'm guessing, yeah, that's more in the technical cycle, which probably is much more studied. That looking into the bio cycle, probably I'm not so sure.
Well, if I can elaborate more on what you just said now, understanding the concept, another path to do that is to understanding the degradation of the material, so you can predict the life and the maintenance cycles. So, for example, if you have a component that is working at a very high temperature or very low temperature and sensors cannot perform, you can elaborate laboratory test based to understand the specific degradation under certain circumstances or the operational environment, and then you can predict when the component needs to be removed to get maintenance before it breaks or before it fails.
I think it sort of links back to a little bit on producer responsibility, where I think Balzerstein mentioned it at his presentation here at Cranfield on the responsibility of whoever produces, even, as you said, up to the atomic, almost to the atomic level. But obviously for the biological cycle, where a lot of the material that goes through the biological cycle is high volume, low value, that might be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, certainly, that there should be a little bit more emphasis on, the producer, or, that knowledge of where your material goes through and being responsible throughout the life of that material, which not just the manufacturer, it could be just the material itself.
Yeah, fantastic. Just a quick pit stop here again, guys, just in case you want to throw in a question, it's #ThinkDiff_. Feel free to do so, and we can again throw some comments to the guys here. I would like to actually expand this conversation a little further and talk about the way in which that we engage with the research students. You're all academics. You're inspired by many types of thinkers, from cradle to cradle, right the way through to perhaps other different types of philosophers, thinkers, or people today that inspire you. I want to always ask this question to an academic: who is the top 1 or 2 members that inspire you today within this space? Have a quick think on that. Who are the 2 people that inspire you today? I'm going to throw this question out to yourself, Adriana. So what are the researchers, academics, or researchers you following that's in relation to circular economy?
Well, for example, it inspired me a lot, the article in Nature from
Walter Stahel?
Yeah.
Walter Stahel,
yeah. Yeah, sorry, it's because I was not sure of the pronunciation. And also when he came to Cranfield to talk, I think that was one of the person that inspired me a lot.
One of the highlights. Yeah, we know that Walter Stahel here at Cranfield is very much a well-respected colleague, but I think also it might be that you probably eliminated another option out of the mindsets of the 2 other candidates guests here. So I'd like to reach out, Adrian, in terms of Rafi, what researcher or person inspires you today?
Well, no, definitely. I sort of reinforce yes, definitely Walter, because it's as you said, there's very few examples of the biological sort of, although it seems very sort of applicable to the biological cycle, is not so well studied, and you only see a little sort of on that fantastic sort of inspiring butterfly. You only see biorefinery and digestate. Now, that's very limited. And so I had a very good discussion with Walter when he was here. Walter, whatever it's called, whatever you pronounce it. Sorry. And about the biological cycle, and obviously, that sort of me a lot on sort of progressing my research into the circular economy. And for us is also looking at emissions is sort of a more holistic vision.
What about yourself, Marie?
For me, as a designer, Michael Bergen, and I cannot pronounce the second author last name, but I think it's I forgot. I don't know. Yeah, well, the cradle to cradle.
The cradle to cradle.
Yeah, thinker. So.
And please tell me, what was the piece that inspired you most in Cradle to Cradle?
I think this idea of it's come from industrial ecology as well, but this idea of using waste as food and how you could design the system. As I said, as a designer, I always think about how to alleviate problems before causing it, because another person that has been inspiring me is Victor Papanek, and looking into his thinking that actually industrial designers, we are part of the problem. I do think the same, because we just create products that we put in the world without thinking what is going to happen to them, how we are going to use them, about their manufacturing process. Like, we think about it just in terms of how we are going to produce it, but we actually don't think about how that production system is going to cost to the general environment, to the social issues. So those 2 ways of thinking from Victor Papanek and Cradle to Cradle actually put things up together into a context that actually you think about the problem first to actually give a solution which is meaningful. So yeah.
And if I can elaborate a little bit more on that, is that, for example, a lot of people think of materials, that there are bad materials, for instance, the plastics, etc. And thinking about it from the point of view that Marielle has just said, is that I don't think there are bad materials. For example, polyester, which is horribly swimming in the beaches at the moment, is 100% recyclable. So it's not the material, it's us, the way we use it, the infrastructure to waste management, how we integrate these materials in a particular design, in a particular object. So if we just collect it and recycle, that's fine. So there are no bad materials, it's bad use and
bad users.
And bad users, yes.
Bad designers.
So
but I think certainly fascinating to the Cradle to Cradle. William McDonald obviously is the co-author.
Yeah.
But the coming back to the point that you're mentioning there is no bad material. That would be a fascinating research question to pitch to a circular economy community. The one thing I'd like to obviously say is that we're noticing in the academic sphere that circular economy is starting to actually resonate with things like the governments, because they're starting to acknowledge this type of phraseology and terminology within the context of their calls, which is actually quite an interesting and definitely an achievement within the communities of the circular economy. What I'd like to do is just to kind of reach out and say, are there any interesting projects or questions you're setting yourself today and now, looking to the short-term future? So are there any research projects that you're thinking about that in terms of 5 or 10 years from this point? So I'm going to throw that question out there to yourself, Mireli.
Well, I'm looking now more into, especially what you were saying in the beginning about like the challenges. So I think, as I said, at the moment, we are just looking into more the role of technology and how we could use data that we generate, but still, I think it's missing to understand some of the social implications of that, and how actually cybersecurity, and if actually we are being, with more we are connected, we also get more apart from each other. So it's looking also into trust issues and things like that. So there's a new book from Rachel Botsman who is called Who Can We Trust? How Technology Drives Us Together and How It Could Drive Us Apart as well. So I think that question on the book is quite important to ask, and future research. I see my future research looking into these issues.
Wow, fantastic. What about yourself as well, Adriana? What about the future? What does it hold for you in the world of materials and design?
Well, for example, now that we have been working on different source of waste to try to make them materials, etc., I would like to explore, and I'm working on it, to see how the natural structure of the waste can provide, for example, a strength or different properties according to different applications, no? So strictly looking the applications from the holistic approach I was mentioning before, that at the beginning we explore the context, where is going to be flowing the material, and how will be at the end of the life of the product or the component. And I would like to explore on making the most of the natural structure that the waste is providing us. For example, in the case of agricultural waste, for example.
So how much does biomimicry come into play here? So in terms of biomimicry features, do you use this, or do you encourage it within your own areas of research, inspired by nature, to create better circular flows?
Well, for example, if we make the most of what is already given by nature, we automatically save manufacturing steps. So, for example, at the moment we have a PhD that is about to finish, and this student is working with the maize husk. So she has been exploring, if the maize husk can be used as a whole, chop, mile, etc. So this is the way I would like to explore further. That, for example, well, once we have it in different states, if we do, for example, I don't know, different positions of the beads, or if we can extract fibers for another waste, maybe we can do a very smart weaving that provides certain strength. So according to the properties we can achieve, we can match it with the standards, with the material standards, and we can say, oh well, this is behaving, for example, like MDF. So maybe if we did a bit of improvements, we can find a substitution for MDF, for example. Or we can be, if we mix it with different matrix, it can be used in the aerospace or in the automotive space. But then we would have to look at the requirements of those sectors. So, but those answers come from investigating the beginning, as we were saying, no? Where is it going to be flowing?
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm actually going to throw in here a question that's being pitched online. Is in relation to this kind of end of life phase, or perhaps maybe not, perhaps preparing for a new life. We've talked about considering the products reaching that point in which it's perhaps not efficient or capable to perform its original function. we will call it, for the sake of argument, its first life. Could you be able to elaborate a bit more on the different types of perspectives and elaborate a bit on how we could, as a society or as a community, as a research body, look to new invested research opportunities to allow for perhaps upcycling, side cycling, or a whole new generation of different types of cycling of materials?
So you mean, for example, what happens the first life at the end of the use of the product? That's
it. For example, I think there was a good example you used about products reaching a certain point in which they have not met their efficiency bar. It may be, I'm going to take, for example, a turbine blade, perhaps within an aircraft, just as an example here. And perhaps it's not sufficient for that particular role, but perhaps it may be very efficient for another type of task. So maybe the material can be melted down, perhaps reformed, and take on a new life for another 10, 20, 30 years. In terms of the materials itself, the interesting question I just wanted to pitch to you is, what kind of examples have you experienced, perhaps in terms of material recycling or new life forms, taking one product through from one step to another? Do you have any interesting examples where perhaps a material has taken on a second life? Might be within organics, bio, then converted into an industrial product?
Well, in the case of the blades, it's difficult because the complexity of the superalloys, for example. The best you can do in that area is to, as we were saying before, to understand when and how the material is going to degrade, so you can provide maintenance and extend the life of this component. No, but there are other more simple things that can be, you can find a second life for them. But I think to do that, you need to understand when the materials are going to stop performing well. So for example, something I have always wanted to do is if we have a simple electrical appliance, for instance, if we know that all the pieces are going to break more or less at the same time, we can think on finding a new home for them to perform, for example, or to make the most of them. So we avoid the situation of one piece is broken and all the rest is in good condition, but it's not useful anymore. So I think it goes back to the design and the planning and the manufacturing, and also, as Rafi was saying, what is going to happen. For example, can we take in pieces and to pick up the ones that are useful? I don't know.
So just moving on in terms of the challenges that it must face within the biosphere.
Well, in the biosphere, there's a lot of good example of what is now called biorefinery, waste biorefinery, where you got product or byproduct from production turn into a new material or a new product. So I don't know, whey from production of cheese is can be fermented to produce other chemicals. So there are examples already existing. What obviously is challenging for the organic is that organic is seen as a whole. But if you think about the organic production, you got your agricultural waste, which is produced in very certain area of the country. Then you got your manufacturing waste, which is again producing maybe in the same place or maybe slightly in a different place from where the production happens. And then you got your consumption waste, which happens mainly in cities, and the three bio waste are very different quality, are very different level of purity, let's say, or impurity, and I've got different locations. So you daily transport a lot of biomaterial into cities. London is an example. You got huge material of coming into London, and then huge material of very different bio waste coming out of London, which is not so anymore so clean or so separated. Is very, very much commingled. So the challenge, what I see myself, a challenge is also identify the best option to link up maybe the processes, but also identify the best way to use the different bio waste. So they might be different. So in a way, you know, in the technical side, you've got different circles going around. I think we should have different circle in the bio as well. You know, with identifying this different type of waste, which are quite different to each other.
I could imagine that, given that there are many of these potential new cycle offerings that we haven't yet explored.
Correct.
However, a bit like the ethics, there must be some form of regulation, standards, requirements that need to happen. Do you foresee that as we move towards from a linear to a circular approach, especially with our bios, that we have to have stricter guidance, regulations, policies, all surrounding quality, the quality definition you're referring to?
Yeah, I think there are already in place a lot of very sort of tight regulation regarding waste. So that's not an issue. If anything, we got maybe a problem on the other side. You know, when you deregulate the waste, when is something come out of this waste cycle and becomes a product. You know, an example is the digestate from anaerobic digestion. You know, is still a waste unless reach a certain quality. So there are regulations already in place that protect us. So that from that point of view, is the perception as well that we have to deal with in a sort of technical cycle. You can call it vintage, and suddenly a waste material become very attractive in a biological cycle. You know, I'm telling you, I've extracted your vitamin C, the one that you're drinking now, from peeling of oranges. Suddenly that might become less appealing to you, although maybe it's just a chemical component, it's just a chemical molecule. It doesn't really matter where it comes from, if it's been through a process, it's been clean and it's been regulated. For some people that is a negative, and the perception of the public is really important when you're dealing with biological, which touches our sort of our life. So we haven't found the vintage equivalent for the bio yet, but I'm sure that
it seems to come. Perhaps being able to convert the human body's waste as well as an energy source might be an interesting space. Suddenly when the energy converts into business model opportunities and income drivers and job creation, suddenly it might become a very sexy topic. The final thing I want to do is we've got a very good set of questions coming out. The one I wanted to kind of reach out here is more to do with communications, inspiring your students. But what about if you get an influx of students who have never been exposed to the circular economy before? What type of challenges do you have, and what's the way in which that you try and inspire the younger generations, the young professionals, into the space of circular economy? What would you do from your perspective, or what do you do, especially when they come through the ranks from undergraduate to postgraduate or research beyond? So I'm going to throw that question out to Marielle to start off with.
Well, I think in our design program, we try to engage the students since the beginning. So they start in October, and since October there is a lot of, as Pioneer University, we have a lot of activities related to circular economy. So we try to engage the students as much as we can. For example, participating in the Disruptive Innovation Festival is one of the things we do. But then also in the curriculum, we have the whole system design module, where we introduce circular economy. And then after that module, we actually get a lot of the students interested in the topic. And it's not just because of the saving the world type of thinking, it's more because of the exciting concept that it is. It's more about how to think in a system level. And we actually put things like, it's not easy, it's a challenge, and it's not that we are going to save the world, but we need to think about these kind of big issues and think about how to solve problems. It's more about solving a problem than rather saving the world discourse. And then, of course, through the group project and individual thesis projects, we try to put a couple of projects related to the topic, and actually are some of the ones that get more interested in. So it's quite exciting. And even that if they don't hear about it before, or even that in the beginning they didn't seem interested in the whole circular economy topic, as soon as you put them the challenge, and that challenge is kind of related to circular economy, they actually find the interest on it. They go and explore a little bit more about it, and they actually get engaged with it. And we have a couple of alumni now that are working in this space, and even with the foundation.
Fantastic. How about yourself, Adriana? How do you inspire the newbies to circular economy? What are the techniques that you use?
Well, to be honest, the students that approach me is because they know I'm already working with that, so I don't really have that problem. But I think it's interesting how one single project, for example, in materials, can attract a student from the environmental courses, for instance, which is great because they can add some knowledge to complement the whole research. No, for example, students that are very, very good in life cycle analysis, for instance. So to have this kind of validation in a project is always very good.
Yeah, okay.
And I always like very much the students to provide their knowledge into my projects. So
the environmental engineers and the energy from waste students have just finished their circular waste management module, where they were asked as an assignment to design organic waste biorefinery to fit into a circular economy model. So they come with no knowledge on circular economy. They're thrown in a little bit in the deep end on my module, certainly, and they are asked to sort of come up with ideas. And by the end of the module, they are truly converted.
I think it most definitely is. It's a fascinating topic, especially for those perhaps that are new, because of perhaps the co-creation aspect to it, the idea of being part of a bigger question, which itself can trigger off multiple questions as well. For example, the idea of truly being able to understand the flows from the biological through to the technological. How do you stop people, rein them in as well, from perhaps getting the best out of them from their area and discipline, but at the same time them not going too far afield out of their own research space?
Yeah, I think the circular, certainly for what I do, the circular economy makes sense. It mimics so well the natural cycle that it kind of becomes almost sort of an extension, sort of, and you talked about biomimicry, so that's so maybe sort of mimicking the overall circular, sort of natural way. So the students seem to understand the boundaries of the circularity. So have I answered?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm fascinated by projects which we ourselves as individuals can undertake very deep, very precise pieces of research within areas of expertise. But like you've described today, you've talked about this crossover of challenges or problems which are much bigger than the sum of all parts that need to be undertaken. So collaborating together, not only within Cranfield, but externally. Can you perhaps talk about some of the examples of the past where you might have undertaken a challenge with other institutions just to try and trigger off and inspire young researchers, perhaps workshops, hackathons, that kind of thing? Marielle?
Well, we had a hackathon 2 years ago, which was the part of the education team from the Elmaker Foundation, joined with 3 universities in their network, with MIT, Cranfield, and Institute of Design in India. And then we brought along Philips and Cisco. They had a particular challenge on using data for to produce business models for Philips, which are circular. So they put the challenge together, and then we brought students and also anyone that could join the hackathon for a 48 hours challenge, in which we were working more than thinking, we were doing, because a hackathon is about that. It's about doing and bringing solutions to the challenge that Cisco and Philips put together. And actually, the results were really amazing. And the hackathon was at the same time in 3 different time zones. So it was a very exciting project to bring along.
Brilliant, brilliant. Throwing out there a question from the community. I'm going to have to read this very precisely because it's a very interesting question. It's really to the three of you. If we had to focus on one area, data-driven tech, materials and design, or biological waste streams, which one is the most circular for a transition to a circular economy? So which one of these is most circular from your perspective? Now, I know this is going to be a very kind of tongue-in-cheek question, but I thought I'd throw it out there. If we could only circularize one of these fields, which one should it be? And I'm going to extend on that. Which one should it be first? So,
yeah.
Go for it.
As I was saying before, I think now we have to work hand to hand, or walk hand to hand, because in collaboration, because one thing is always going to have impact in the next one, and so on, and it's going to all of us in the same circle, no? So as I was saying, from my point of view in materials improvement and development, at this point of my life, I wouldn't go just to choose for what I think is the best option without considering what is going to happen at the end of life and where the context or where my material is going to be flowing or living, if you like, or providing a service, or etc. So I think they are, or we can get such extent of specialization that definitely I would like to carry on working with Rafi for, you know, when things got dirty and messy. Can we compose this, for example, this material? Can we separate it chemically, etc. So, you know, I don't have that background, but she will tell me the answers. We can work together, etc. Likewise, for example, with Mariale, where she says, you know, you have to consider the business models and this kind of thing that, you know, I never look at the management or the administrative point of view. On the other hand, I think I can provide them answers. For example, you know, if they want to test a material or if they want to do something that is definitely crazy from the materials point of view, I will let them.
So I think my answer is that it doesn't matter. I think once you start circularizing, it has to, you will start. You will touch the others. You know, you will affect. I think it doesn't really matter where you start from. Obviously, for me, it's waste stream, but yeah, no, I don't think it matters. I think once you start, you know, sort of applying the concept to your, you know, materials, you know, you will affect the other two, and vice versa. When you start looking at your data collection, you will affect the other two. So
interesting.
Yeah. And that's why circular economy is based on the principle of systems thinking, and systems thinking always look into it's a dynamic system. We are always moving, but once you alterate or start making an effect on the system, that will make a chain reaction and influence all elements in the system. So and we will always be in a dynamic situation. It's about how we could stabilize the system in a way that we don't harm it. We actually benefit and create value from it.
Fantastic. So I'd like to obviously bring this session to a close. But before I do, I'd like to ask one last question to the panel here. And that is, what words of wisdom would you provide to the fellow colleagues watching this session? what would you give them as a tip and advice if they are interested in the circular economy? Where would they go? What would they do? So I'm going to kick that question off with Mariella yourself, if you can for me, please.
Keep being informed, read.
Keep informed, keep reading.
Yeah.
Cradle to cradle, perhaps?
Yes.
As a first step, really.
I learned the name of the authors because I always have trouble pronouncing them, so sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, definitely the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website, but even, you know, just Nature, publication like Nature, all is sort of starting to publish more sort of holistic articles on circular economy. The European Union has got a lot of information on circular economy, which is, you know, interesting reading.
Last but not least, Adriana.
Yeah, also complementing on here, looking at the official reports, for example, for material flows, recycling, all that kind of thing. And I think another thing very important is governmental policies, because we really need to make our research to fit on that interest as well. Okay. That's very important.
Fantastic. So this is the point in the Grill the Geeks where I will hand back over to Leo. Before I do, I'd like to obviously thank our fellow guests here who are participating at Cranfield University. I myself, Dr. Leon Williams, the chair, have had the privilege to speak to these fellow colleagues. But I would say to both Leo, DIF, if there are any requests for future communications, please feel free to contact the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And at this point, I'd like to hand back over to Leo. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Leon, for coordinating the grilling and getting the discussion underway. And thank you all, Mariella, Rafi, and Adriana, for giving your insights and experiences and thoughts around the circular economy and how you're integrating that within your areas of research and in your teaching at Cranfield University. It was great. So we heard about data-driven tech, we heard about materials and design, we heard about biological systems. And I think, you know, if you were linear-minded, then perhaps you would have had a bit of an argument about which one of those topics was more crucial when transitioning towards a circular economy. But I liked the collaboration rather than the competition there. And thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for joining us from around the world, and thank you for asking your questions throughout the grill. We had some really interesting questions, and if you wanted to, as Leon said, if you wanted to find out more, or if you have any further questions, then initially pop any comments and questions on the session page where you're watching this, or contact Cranfield University or the DIF team directly, and we will point you in the right directions. And it may be the end of this session here. We've been here for an hour now, but this is the start of the second week of the Disruptive Innovation Festival 2017, and we've got 10 full working days of pre-recorded and live content coming up for you. And you don't have to wait too long for the next session coming from Cranfield University at 12 o'clock at midday UK time. We have Innovations for Circular Sanitations, where I'll be joined by some other speakers from Cranfield University. And another session right now, actually in around about 30 seconds time, we'll be releasing the first of two bespoke videos from the University of Exeter. First up we had Peter Hopkinson, and then at 11:30 we have Michelle Miller talking about circular economy in education. So that kind of follows up from a couple of the points that were discussed just a few moments ago. And make sure, if you've missed anything from the DIF so far, we've recorded all of the live sessions, and we have lots of pre-recorded videos up on the DIF schedule. So just go back and watch to your heart's content. So thank you again, Leon, Mariella, Rafi, and Adriana for joining us today. And until next time, it's goodbye from me.